name a number of times in speeches because you joined with Jim Woolsey and about 30 other prominent Americans to write a letter to the President saying, Mr. President, the fact that we have only 2% of the oil, we use 25% of the world's oil, we import about 2/3 of what we use as an unacceptable national security risk. Mr. President, you really have to do something about that. Thank you for the letter, sir, and I'm sorry that we have done essentially nothing about that. I think that the most important speech of the last century was given the 8th day of March in 1956 by an oil geologist by the name of M. King Hubbard in San Antonio, Texas. And he made an absolutely audacious prediction. At that time, the United States was king of oil. We produced more oil, we used more oil, we exported more oil than any country in the world. And M. King Hubbard said in just 14 years, in 1970, we're going to reach our peak oil production, and after that, no matter what we do, oil production in the United States will go down. He was relegated to the lunatic fringe, but sure enough, in 1970, we reached maximum oil production. That was clearly obvious by 1980, by the way, and in a moment or two, I will return to that, because we now have known of an absolute certainty for 31 years that we were going to be here today. If the United States is not a microcosm of the world, what is it? If the United States peaked in its oil production, clearly the world is going to peak in its oil production. I think that the most insightful speech of the last century was given just about a year later by the father of our nuclear submarine, Hyman Rickover. I think it was the day of, it was 15th day of May, I think, in St. Paul, Minnesota, 57, to a group of physicians. Audience is irrelevant, because it had nothing to do with physicians. But he gave, I think, the most insightful speech of the last century. He said that in the 8,000-year recorded history of man, the age of oil would be but a blip. And he called this the golden age. And he does pull it up, by the way. It was lost for a number of years. Now it's back on the internet. Just do a Google for Rickover and energy speech, or I think there's a link to it on our website. You can find it there. He had no idea how long the age of oil would last. We now know how long the age of oil will last. But he said how long it lasted was important in only one regard. The longer it lasted, the more time would we have to plan an orderly transition to other sources of energy. Of course, we have done none of that. With reckless abandon, we have gone out to find all the oil we can as quickly as we can and to consume it as quickly as we can. And now we have a mantra: drill, baby, drill, drill now, drill more, pay less, and the unspoken part of that mantra is to hell with our kids and our grandkids. Let them shift for themselves. We actually reached peak oil in 2006. There's now general recognition of that by essentially everybody. The last holdouts were ExxonMobil and Sierra, and it's now indisputable that the world reached its maximum production of conventional oil in 2006. We're now supplementing that with some unconventional oil like the tar sands of Alberta, Canada, and the heavy sour from Venezuela. The general predictions now of where oil production from the fields that we are now pumping is going in the future is down, down, down. And the prognosticators are saying that we're going to make up the difference with exploitation of the fields that we have now found, and a lot of the oil, they say, by 1935 is going to come from exploiting fields yet to be discovered. The biggest discoveries of oil in our country were back in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and it was pretty much all over by the 80s. Because in 1980, for the first time, we used more oil than we pumped. And since then, it's been down, down, down with the discovery of oil, and up, up, up with the use of oil. The Arabs did us a favor in the 70s with their oil price spike hikes, because there was a huge bending of the curve. If the consumption curve had continued as it was, and every decade up until the Carter years, and every decade up into the Carter years, we used as much oil as had been used in all of previous history. What that means, of course, is that had that trend continued, when we had used half of all the oil, how much time would remain? 10 years. Well, you're not going to go out 10 years and fall off a cliff. But now we have really slowed the growth of that curve. We have enormous efficiencies today compared to the 70s. So thank you, Arabs, for that wake-up call. We didn't pay enough attention to it, but it really did us some good. There's a general consensus now that what we need to do is just drill more. Dick Cheney came several years ago to try to get me to vote to drill in ANWR, and I said, I'll be happy to do that, Mr. Vice President, when you promise me that you're going to use all of the revenues that you get from ANWR to invest in alternatives, because we're really late in investing in alternatives. And I said, you know, we're going to leave our kids a big debt. I had no idea then how big that debt was going to be. It is every 6 hours there is another $1 billion deficit, which means another $1 billion debt. About every 12 hours there's another $1 billion trade deficit. Friends, we can't continue with these twin deficits. We just can't continue with these twin deficits. I hardly know what to say, because, you know, we've been talking about your country, by the way, has paid for 4 studies. The first one was a big Hearst report, SAIC, called the Hearst report, and Bob Hearst was in my office this morning from 8 to 9. We hadn't seen each other for a number of months and wanted to chat on where we were. And what the Hearst report said was that the peaking of oil was either present or imminent, with potentially devastating consequences. If you couldn't anticipate the peaking of oil by a decade or two, it said the world had never faced a problem like this, that the social and economic consequences would be unprecedented. And then in 2005, there was another report by the Army Corps of Engineers saying the same thing. The peaking of oil is either present or imminent, with potentially devastating consequences. I don't think that the SAIC people at Bob Hearst and his crew knew that in just 1 year after they issued their report that we would in fact peak in conventional oil production in the world. Then in 2007, there were 2 more reports, one from the Government Accountability Office and a second one asked for by the President, the National Petroleum Council. And all 4 of those reports said essentially the same thing. The peaking of oil is either present or imminent, with potentially devastating consequences. My wife said, you shouldn't be talking about this kind of thing, because don't you remember in ancient Greece, they killed the messenger that brought bad news? And my response is, this is a good news story, because if we start today, it will be less difficult than if we start tomorrow. We can't start yesterday, so the best thing that we can do is start today. I tell audiences that the innocence and ignorance about energy in our general population is astounding. And we have truly representative government.